Hi, everyone. I'm Justina and Jeff, and I'm a developer evangelist at Optimizely, like Andy said. Here's a little bit about us. So what I really care about is talking to developers and understanding their pain points, and really what they're trying to do is mitigate risk and roll out features. I also evangelize experimentation. Obviously, that's why we're all here. And I'm joined by Jeff Singh. He's our lead QA engineer, and what his team focuses on is really delivering high-quality products. Now, why are we both here to speak to you about feature flags and experimentation? It's because we promise to deliver to customers the ability to deliver to their customers a really unique and seamless experience through experimentation. So we're going to go over kind of the struggles and tactics that you feel when you're launching a new feature, a new product, like Jane mentioned, and how you can optimize the user experience with experimentation. Jane really set us up for success here because she talked about mitigating risk, which feature flags help you with, and really how to optimize your user experience with experimentation. So to set things up, we're going to talk about how to use feature flags to experiment more safely, because it is all about mitigating risk, because you're ultimately trying to find which variation of your product or app is the best one for in terms of conversion, or whichever success metric that you're defining. So who here has launched a new feature or product in the last 6 months? Awesome. So launch days are really exciting. You're all gathering around, anticipating all the usage that you're going to get, looking at your dashboards, and really seeing how many users are using these new products. But what happens if the launch doesn't go so hot? You're getting all these tickets in with bugs, or maybe your users aren't responding as well to that new feature that you've been super excited about. And so really progressive companies are really thinking about rolling out these features. Instead of launching big launches, they're thinking about how they can slowly introduce new products or new features to their customers so that they can mitigate their response and also roll back if needed. So we've been talking a lot about launching products and features more safely, but what can you actually do? And what are the tools that are available to you? Here enter feature flags. So feature flags, like Andy mentioned, give you the power to enable or disable features or products for your customers. It's basically an on and off switch. And so Optimizely empowers you to do that remotely and without redeploying every single time. You can control who sees which feature and when. And so within feature management, there's this concept called controlled rollouts. You can roll out different features in different environments. So if you're preparing to test a feature before rolling it out to entire production, you could roll things out in stages to the staging environment. Or maybe you have a group of your beta users that you want to test out your product before you deliver it to everyone in production. And slowly, as you feel more confident with its functionality and its performance, you're going to roll it out to everybody. And so the first thing we're going to demo is a feature flag. So if you could all pull out your phones and open up the camera app and scan the QR code, you should see this moon. Let me know when you see the moon by raising your hands.
Awesome.
Where's the QR code?
Oh, on these little slips that we've handed out. Awesome. And we could put it online as well. Great. So at this time, Jeff is going to enable the feature flag behind the scenes here. But I'm going to talk about what that looks like. So first, we're going to enable it in production, right? So all of you can see it. And so we're going to slowly roll this out to 5% of you at a time. And what this looks like at an actual company is instead of blasting this new feature or product to our entire user base, a very small percentage of you are going to see it. And slowly, as we feel more confident about how the feature is performing, and we're queuing along the way, we're rolling it out to 25% now, and then ultimately, we get it to 50%. Now, if you can all refresh your phones and raise your hands if you see the astronaut. Awesome. So about 50% of you will see that now. But let's say, at our companies, 50% of you saw this feature and you weren't super responsive to it, or maybe you hated it, when the performance is not going so hot, and we need to roll that back. We don't want you guys to see this anymore. And so that's what we would do. We would toggle this switch off, and no one would see that feature. And so the remaining 50% would have never experienced this feature in the first place. But after QAing, as Jeff's team would do at our company, we see that the feature is performing how we would actually like, and we want it to roll out to everybody. And all it would take is rolling out to 50%, to 100%, because the feature is already hidden behind a feature flag, enabling us to control that feature and its visibility. Jeff is going to talk about how important it is to actually do a targeted rollout so that a subset of our users can see it at a time, and not just 5% of a random audience choosing who you want to roll that out to.
All right. Thank you, Justina. So, caught my leg. Sorry. So, Justina just talked about you just rolled out your product, right? But sometimes you may not want to roll out your feature, your design, to everybody, right? Sometimes you only want to target a certain subset of your customer. This could be, like we said, to mitigate risk, right? You may want to just have your product be available to a subset of customers that are high on you, that they don't care if the functionality may not work perfectly. A good example of this is Microsoft. Microsoft has a die-hard fan base that they always will take a build early on, willing to be guinea pigs on it. So when you do rollouts, sometimes you may not want to just do general audience. You may want to target a subset of beta users, a subset of your favorite users, or maybe you want to test this out on only iPhones or only people in a certain city. Like, hey, this makes more sense in San Francisco. Let's roll this feature out, this design out to them first. So, is this button here? What we did today for our experiment is to kind of demo this idea is we chose two rows 1 and rows 5. So this is a live demo. Hopefully this works, but if you could refresh your phones, and if you see the astronaut on your phone, raise your hand. Oh, okay, that's rows 1 and kind of row 5. It's pretty good. All right. One more time. Can we see? Rows 1 still. Is anyone in row 5? One person row 5? 2?
I think I might have pinned it up
5 to 2? Okay, my bad. All right. Human error. But yeah, okay. So the biggest thing from this is when you do roll your out, we don't just think of, hey, how do I mitigate my risk to roll back? Also think about, what is my audience? Who do I want to see my new features? Who will give me the best feedback? And this way you can kind of control the risk.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. So how we think about feature flags, we see them as the levers for experimentation. You're really controlling the entire experience of what your user sees and really how they're experiencing your overall product and business. So I like this analogy of it being kind of like this DJ board set, that you're controlling different variations and tweaking very slight things so that the ultimate experience can be optimized. And so I'm sure most of you are familiar with a board that looks something like this. And tons of people are generating new ideas for you to build at your company. So everyone's super excited and wants to build different features and products, but how exactly do you decide what feature to build? And to Jane's point and the question earlier, we're going to be talking a little bit about painted door tests. And so in particular, we're going to be focusing on how to build and release products more confidently. And so feature flags kind of set that foundation for both A/B tests, as well as really optimizing the entire experience. And so this kind of graph that everyone's taking a picture of is how we see the entire life cycle of both including feature management as well as experimentation. And then Jane really emphasized at home why you should be thinking about A/B tests and really what the criteria are that you need to think about before you actually conduct an A/B test. It takes a lot of resources and energy from designers, engineers, product managers, marketers. It takes the entire village, as Becca will talk about later, as we run an experimentation program at Optimizely. But just a very high level, this is a pretty simple A/B test in terms of a controlled variation, and we're testing the color of the button. Pretty simple, visible A/B tests that you're doing here. And so Jeff's going to talk more about painted door tests and why they're pretty important in terms of being a product designer and how you can use them to actually gather data to make informed decisions about what to build at your company.
First off, there's nothing harder than following an amazing speaker like Jane, where she's like, don't do painted doors. Okay, I'm kidding. She didn't really say that, but someone did ask.
I don't like painted
You don't like
doors.
those doors.
I'm full of fucking opinions, man. Don't
All
worry
right.
about me.
But to answer the question earlier, what a painted door is a painted door is a test that creates a minimal user experience that mimics the full feature set and measures the number of users who engage with it. For this demo today, we actually made a painted door. So once again, pull your phones out if you can refresh. And what we want you to see, everyone should be seeing this astronaut. So for our painted door experiment, we wanted you to say, hey, if I told you you could push blast off, maybe the astronaut blasts off. So if you decide you want to see this astronaut blast off, maybe push that button. You don't have to, but if you want to try it, do it. So who actually pushed the button? Wow, it's a lot. Good. OK, so what actually happened here is this is our painted door experiment. What Optimizely does and what we did here is this button is actually connected to something called a conversion event. We fire this event, and this lets us know that, hey, someone came to our page, saw this button, and was like, yes, I want this. I want to see this guy fly. Clicked it. And that triggered this event. Now, why is that important? So what really happens in going along with this example, one of the real-world experiments we do here at Optimizely is we use painted doors to collect these conversion events. So for example, our ML team wants to release something called a celebrated experiment. This is really expensive. This is a whole new statistic learning model. It involves many data scientists, engineers, front-end designers, UX designers to come up with this because math is kind of complicated, right? So do we fund this? Do we build this? Is this something competitive advantage or not? So we used the painted door experiment to kind of figure this out. And we tracked how many conversion events happened. Does this make sense? Should we build this? Is this something that we want to fund? What is our ROI? Do we get this? Is it worth building? So talk about this. How does your experiment broken down? How do you judge if you should build something, right? And Jane actually did a really great job, so I'm just going to go over some of this stuff again. But conversions are huge, right? What you're looking for is, did someone actually click the experiments that you wanted? What is the number of conversions to visitors who were exposed to this variation actually trigger your event, right? And you can actually give value to that. You can say, I want to know what my total conversion value shows for the value generated. If I have a button and I know that every time someone clicks this button, I get X amount of money for it, this is how much more money I would have gotten for clicking it. That's a very simple example. Please don't cringe, but basically that's what conversions mean, right? So we know how many event conversions you had. That's not really important. Important is what actually improves. How do you improve, right? So here we usually calculate this using variations, value per conversion minus the original VPC divided. It's math. Let's leave it there. But this gives you a value, a real number that tells you, how much value did this actually have if we put this out. Now that I know that my experiments run and I have the event conversions, is there improvement, right? And finally, none of this matters unless you get statistical significance, right? Here's the definition. But what it really means is, did this experiment run its course, and does this number that I'm getting actually matter? And if it doesn't, then you're following a lie, right? What this tells you is, yes, you can trust this experiment. Yes, this actually means something. And at Optimizely, we use the sequential testing model, but different companies will use things like t-test, Bayesian. It all depends. So what does this look like in real life? I just kind of threw out a bunch of words. So here is an actual experiment that I sanitized. One thing to take note is this is a decrease. We're looking for less, not more, right? So for this experiment, what we found is here's our conversion amounts. That means that for the value that we're looking for did drop, right? And the assigned value per conversion was less. It actually did what we thought it would do, right? So that's good. I mean, this is just a number, right? But would it have been different if it's 8,000 versus 6,000? What is the right amount of improvement that we know that this is the winner versus loser? And that's where our statistical significance matters. We calculate this using our mathematical equation, and we find that with the sequential test, 99% is winner. We can trust that this variation is the better variation. We can trust that this is the one we want to design. So what we did now is, this is the actual QR code now, but you can also go to this bit.ly, which is really hard to see. If you go to this site, we'll actually take you to the result page for today's experiment. what this page will tell you is how many of you today went to the site to see our painted door, our Mr. Astronaut. How many of you guys really wanted to see him fly and actually click that link? And it'll tell you how many visitors versus how many conversions. Did anyone go? Does it work? All right, awesome. Cool. So I just want to leave you with this final thought. Who here uses Snapchat? Who here remember last year when they did a redesign and everyone was like, no? And
Somebody over 30s.
that was it, right? This is crazy, right? You don't have to, if you're a designer or you're a developer, you don't have to do this. This makes no sense. Why wouldn't you release at a cadence where you know it's safe? And if you know immediately something's going wrong, why wouldn't you revert? If you used a feature flag, you could have instantly reverted back. If you use targeted rollouts, you could have at least gone to a subset of customers that you trust that would still stick with you. But they didn't. They released to everyone. And what happened? They lost millions of users. So that's, want to go here? That's me and Justina's talk. If you go to optimize.com rollouts, this is actually our free feature flag product. And can you say?
Yeah. So Optimizing Rollouts is our free feature flagging product. And we, like I said earlier, we see feature flags as kind of the foundation to end the journey to experimentation. So once you feel pretty confident flagging your features and you want to start creating variations of those features and testing them against each other, then you'd graduate to the experimentation part. So we really suggest and recommend to people that they start with feature flags. And so if you have any questions, we'd be happy to take them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm like left or right.
Questions? Anybody?
Awesome.
Oh,
Right here.
That was great.
thank you.
Thank you for the talk. Wondering, why are there so many different statistical significance models across the different products out there?
You want?
I can answer that.
What?
You can answer.
Yeah. Okay. So we believe the sequential testing model will get you to static faster, and there's certain edge cases where the sequential testing model will cover for you that will not give you false positives. We feel that the t-test, there are certain instances where if you get the wrong amount of users at the wrong time, it'll give you a fake yes versus no. So we feel this is the safest and the fastest. Now, is the best, the end all? Not quite. There's not really one statistical model that is better for everything. In general, that's why I'll kind of plug it. Optimizely has a data lab, right? We wanted you to be able to send your data to us, and we'll give you 6, 7 different statistical models. Like Google uses t-test, other companies might use Bayesian for different kind of statistical models. We'll let you use all 3, right? But in reality, if a company says, hey, we have the best statistical model for everything, they're lying to you.
The other thing I would add to that is the model that we use actually, when you're running an experiment, most people get really excited to look at the results, and that's what's called peaking. You actually peak before it reaches statistical significance, and so you make decisions off of data that's actually not true yet. And so most of the time people are like, oh great, this button color is the winner, I'm gonna go with that one. And so our model is so that it's always streaming data, so that there's never a time, like Jeff said, that you're gonna run into a false positive, and people get pretty excited about looking at experimentation data, so we wanna make sure that there's never a false positive for you.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So, are there terms, like maybe for somebody who's not an analyst, that designers can learn, possibly to get more familiar with these different types of models?
So are there terms or
do you recommend that we as designers learn about these different models to be able to communicate with product managers or developers, and where can we possibly find the resources?
Yeah. I guess so. Yes, I highly recommend that everybody learn these terms, because then it actually helps inform the way you choose what you're going to experiment on, and it also helps you understand the data a lot better. And then the types of resources, actually, we have an Optimizely glossary. That's really helpful, and we really lay out every single definition and example. We also have statisticians in the house that are happy to talk to people about this kind of stuff all day, every day. So please feel free to email us and reach out.
Also, I guarantee the majority of you that work in a software company or any kind of company has your in-house data engineers. Who here has a stat engineer or data engineer? Just go like poke them and be like, hey, what's a t-test? I'll buy you a beer, and I guarantee you for the next 6 hours, you'll learn more about math than you ever wish you learned.
I feel like they'll just tell you as
Yeah.
soon as you ask.
You don't even need a beer. They'll just
Yeah.
like, thank you for asking. Let me tell you my life story. But true story. Really, if you do, they will love you for this because they love their numbers.
Cool. Yeah.
What do you recommend number for statistical significance? Is it you go all the way to 99%, or is it a little lower number that you might cut off at?
Can you guys repeat
That's
the
tough.
question in the mic?
So the question was, what number would we recommend for statistical significance and that we cut off at? Is that correct? You want to take this one?
Yeah.
Final answer.
Yes. So what we actually recommend is you have to have a certain number of visitors to your site who actually see the variations. So that's the first thing you want to get started with. If you only have 100 visitors to your app, probably going to be a little harder to determine statistical significance from there. I'd have to get back to you, to be honest, on like a number that we decide on. There's no final answer on that. So I'd have to get back to you on that.
The traditional way of A/B testing is really confusing. I mean, not confusing, it's difficult because you need a lot of conversions and visitors to actually reach that point. However, there is like machine learning, like multi-armed bandits, that can help you reach significance faster, and it can predict off what they're seeing and learn, and as it learns, it quickly determines statistic faster. So using like ML can, like, or accelerated learnings or any kind of impact kind of analysis will speed it up, but you have to add that on top of the current A/B experimentation.
I have a question about Optimizely real quick. What kind of companies use Optimizely? How big are the companies that use your product?
That's a good question. So going back to what I said, we do suggest and kind of require a minimum amount of visitors just because it's really hard to run variations and have enough users to see those variations. So we would recommend at least 100K monthly visitors to get those impressions. In terms of like verticals, a lot of different verticals use us, right? Retail is a pretty big one, travel industry, finance, those are pretty big verticals that use us.
Do you have any more questions?
What are some of the best practices for rolling back a feature flag for project clients who've already started to adopt this feature?
Ooh, you want me to go?
Yeah, this is Jeff's favorite question.
All right, that's.
Can you repeat it because we need to capture it on
Okay,
audio.
so the question was, what's the best practices for your feature flags when you already rolled them out, right? And how do you manage the risk, the blast radius? Is that what I'm trying to get at? Like, how do you manage the blast radius? What happens in emergency? How do you take care of it, right?
And clients have already started to adopt it and they start to get used to this feature. What are the best practices for saying, we don't have this feature anymore, sorry?
Okay, all right, so let me speak to the first part, and then I'll try to get to your second part. All right, so I think the most important thing that a lot of people don't understand about feature flags is that there are many feature flag types, and how you have each type needs to be managed by different ones. What we showed you today was experimentation feature flag and then a rollout feature flag, right? A rollout feature flag is like, hey, I have a new feature, I'm gonna roll it to you, let's roll it safely. Experimentation feature flag is like, I'm gonna roll something out and I wanna see how many people actually wanna use it, right? There's also permission type of rollouts, like, hey, only people who pay me this much money will get to use the service. There's also DevOps flags, like, hey, we are tied to New Relic or some kind of monitoring system and crap, we don't want to use them, we're going to turn it off. Or, hey, I have some image I want to show and I don't want to deploy that image every single time, I'm going to deploy just the location of the resource and then use the feature flag toggle on and off, right? That's an operation flag. So the long story short, each of these types have a few things in common. One is you need to understand what I call the blast radius. What's the risk involved of using this flag, and can I remove it, right? If the answer is no, you can never roll it back, then you shouldn't even be deploying it out. The second thing you need to think about is expiration date, right? And this needs to be communicated with all the stakeholders. You should never throw a feature flag out in a deployment side or experimentation side and be like, I left it out there and it's out there, right? That's really dangerous. And what you're gonna have is people are gonna be like, what happened to this flag? Or worst come to worst, like, whose flag is this? Why is this? What does this mean, right? I have a horror story where there's a flag that says, do not turn off. That's the name of the flag. And it's like, you know, okay, right? So what we do here at Optimizely is we strict rules where if you put a flag out, you have to say, what does this flag do on and off? Yes, it must be rolled back. Who's the stake owner that removes the flag? Who's the stake owner that tells me when I can remove this flag? Once I turn this flag on, how many days can it be alive before I take it out? And whose job is to take it out? And then we have processes in place to enforce that they get taken out. And what we find, to answer your second question, is when we create this process like this, there's no longer a question of where did my feature go? It's like, yes, I knew this feature is going to be out for this long, and I knew this feature is going to be removed. It's not a long-living feature. And by managing those expectations and managing what's out there, you're kind of reducing the risk involved of something coming back to bite you. Is that kind of, so long, I feel like the 10,000-mile answer, sorry.
That's a great answer.
Okay.
I have one more question, and then we gotta get to trivia. So, well, actually, I could just ask it myself because it's like, okay, so you know, like Gmail, for example, Gmail will come out with a new design, and they'll be like revert back to the old design. They give you that option, especially like in the new days. How many people do you think actually get access to the new design? And also, do you guys include that as features to be able to let the user control what kind of experience that they have? Or maybe you will in the future.
I don't know.
To control?
Yeah.
Not really. Yeah.
We're deliberating.
Yeah.
To answer your first question, how many people we think, I mean, there are examples where Facebook rolls out their feature just to New Zealand, right? And so only those people will get the new feature, whatever it is. But that's a good population size to test out that functionality. And so typically we recommend a smaller percentage of that. So I can't say like the number of, I don't know the number of people that are actually getting that new feature, but typically definitely on the smaller percentage. And kind of to piggyback off of Jeff's answer for the previous question, being pretty strict about who you add into the beta group is also, we're really strict about that. And every week we're really vocal and visible about who's using what feature and when. And that really helps with like, we just rolled this back and now this customer is really disappointed. There's just always constant communication and visibility about who's getting what feature.
Do we have anybody else who wants to ask one final question right back there?
What about rolling out the new pricing, which is totally different from rolling out the features? Are there any best practices of like rolling out the new pricing for particular types of customers?
So,
Do you actually roll that out to 100% of your customers?
so the question is, what about rolling out new pricing instead of new features? Is that correct? You want to answer this one?
I'm going to attempt to answer this one. I think in terms of like the actual functionality, you could use feature flags for that. However, this is like Justina talking now. I wouldn't put this on Optimizely. I think the best thing to do when rolling out new pricing is being transparent with your customers. An example that I know recently, actually, this weather app has a beautiful UI, beautiful UX, but they actually wrote an email and was like, oh, we're going to shut down now because we can't pay for our API events anymore. So if you want to keep using us, pay for us. I think being transparent is the best way. I don't know if like rolling out or turning on enterprise features is the best way to communicate with your customers. I'd almost say like, be careful with using feature flags and rolling out new pricing. However, I do know that a lot of companies test the pricing and plans page. And when I say that, I don't mean like they just put a new price tag on there. They think about the entire journey of You know, most people go to the pricing page because they're confused about what you're offering as a product. So they go to the pricing page to try to see a list of features that you offer. So I would think about that experience before you suddenly roll out like, okay, now we're a 100K subscription. Thinking about that, and you could test the plans page before you actually like say this is how much this product is now.
So I cannot confirm nor deny any companies that do this, but if you look online, there may or may not be an airline company that may or may not be experimenting with prices using feature flags. But I would not know the answer to that question. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Justina and Jeff.
Thank you.
Awesome.
That was great.